Well, I am Poppy Reid. I am Editor-in-Chief at the Bragg Media, which has a bunch of titles under its umbrella, which I won't bore you with, but Rolling Stone Australia, Variety Australia, Tone Deaf, the Music Network. But firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of these unceded lands that we gather on today, of course, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also to any First Nations people here today or tuning in. Thank you for sharing your culture with us, especially our First Nations artists, our First Nations songwriters and musicians. So today's panel is all about unpacking this year's eligibility criteria for this year's 2023 ARIA Awards. It's a big topic, I have to admit. When I got the PDF, I was like, wow, there is a lot here. But thankfully, we have a bunch of experts here to take us through it, to unpack it, to talk about the global impact of why the ARIA Awards are so needed. And actually, this is the first time that we've ever had an open conversation about the ARIA eligibility criteria ever, and that is testament to ARIA being so transparent about these things, and I've seen a lot of that, and especially since Annabelle took her role as well. So amazing. Let's kick things off. There is a lot to get through. We can take questions at the end, I think. So, but I have a few of mine first. But first, we'll intro all of our experts. Okay. So we've got Jess Keeley here. So she's been working in the music industry for over 20 years now. She's managed acts like Licky Lee, which was your first client, wouldn't you believe? What a name to start with. Okay. Shania Twain, Marina and Arcade Fire, and thanks to her work in London and LA, she's got extensive knowledge of developing and maintaining a global career, and we're very lucky because she's now based here in Sydney, and her focus is now on building sustainable international careers for artists, and on her roster at the moment is two powerhouse women, Jaguar Jonze and Isabella Manfredi. Yeah, warranted. Buy
a ticket to the Vivid show, which is coming up on June 1.
Go. Nice, at the Opera House, coming up. Annabelle Herd, of course, the CEO of the music industry's recorded music bodies, ARIA and PPCA. She joined both companies in 2021 following a 16-year career at commercial TV network, Network 10. Where she was COO, and she's also on the Council of Afters, which is the Screen and Broadcast School. Thank you, Annabelle, for joining us. And then we have Lynne Small. So Lynne has been with ARIA since 1996. She is the Chief Operating Officer, and prior to joining ARIA, she spent almost 7 years at Festival Records. Pretty cool. She is a CPA, holds an MBA from the AGSM, as well, and she's a director and vice chair of both the Australian Copyright Council and co-chair of Support Act. How do you have time for anything else? Okay, we can go into that maybe later. Bill Cullen is the co-founder and managing director of One Louder Entertainment. That's the home to Paul Kelly, Kate Miller-Heidke, Alex the Astronaut, Grace, Ballpark Music. Impressive roster. He's also the artist manager director of the PPCA and an ambassador, and was the founding chairperson of the AAM, the Association of Artist Managers. And then Mitaru McGaughey, so is the did I say that right? Mitaru McGaughey? McGaughey, my bad.
But that was good.
No, it wasn't. It was terrible. So Mitaru is the co-founder and managing director of Blak Label Music. It's a First Nations-led... Another gasp. Oh, we're doing good. Okay. Let's aim for 10 before the end. A First Nations-led independent record label that aims to bring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voices, stories and art to a global stage. And he's also an ARIA observer through the Observer program. But let's start with you, Lynne. What are the major changes that have been announced to the ARIA eligibility criteria? Take us through.
Okay, so on the 20th of April, we wrote to all ARIA members, which we do every year, and we sent them the draft criteria that we're proposing for the coming year. And in the draft criteria we sent around last month, there were a number of changes, but most of them were to do with chart eligibility aspects of criteria for the different categories of award. So what we've done across the board really is to broaden it and mostly to include things like the artist-only charts, to add them as another option, as well as being on the major charts, the main singles and albums. Now for a number of categories, if you appear on the Australian artist charts, you would also make it through. So the relevant ones are the Breakthrough Artist Award, the Michael Gudinski Breakthrough Artist Award, Best Pop Release, Best Dance Electronic. And with Best Dance Electronic, we introduced some new Australian artist charts during the course of this year. So we've been able to add those into the eligibility for that one. Best Soul R&B, we have changed that one this year to drop it from being a chart appearance to having been surveyed on that particular chart during the period. The other ones...
Wait, can you just define what you mean by being surveyed on that particular chart during the period?
So getting into a bit of how the charts work now, very briefly, many of our charts are run on the basis of a survey. And that means that people contact us to give us the information about the release and indicate what charts they would like it surveyed or considered for. Often the main charts, but then for particular releases, people might choose a genre chart. So in this instance, we'd be saying you mightn't have made it onto the Australian Artist R&B chart, but you must have at least been surveyed for it. Yep. The other ones are Adult Contemporary, Best Hard Rock Heavy Metal, Mix Engineer and Producer. So all of those have been expanded to now include an appearance on the top 50 Australian artist charts.
ARIA has actually been doing a few talks this week. They've hosted panels on R&B and hip-hop as well. Mitaru, you were there. I think it's amazing. I think that it's so cool that we're finally having this transparency around eligibility just due to it not happening before. And ARIA saying, why don't we talk about that? That's cool. So, Mitaru, can you give us a little bit of a brief overview of the key themes and takeaways that you have from appearing on the hip-hop and R&B panels on Monday?
Yeah, definitely. So, I guess just watching both panels, the biggest takeaway I took away from it was how different the struggles are between the hip-hop genre and the R&B genre. I know a lot of the time these two genres are kind of, bundled together. As with the ARIA charts, we have the hip-hop and R&B releases. But a lot of what was talked about in the R&B panel was vastly different to what was talked about in the hip-hop panel. But I think key themes across both of them were, there's a sort of lack of information or a divide of information between what ARIA is and what we do and what the charts are versus what the general music industry perceive it to be. And I think there's a lot of confusion in that and a lot of room for education trickled down. And then the second thing is, while there was a lot of talk on charting criteria and award eligibility, what both sort of panels were really heavy on was more advocacy around, helping these sort of subgenres and subcultures in hip-hop and R&B to blossom and keep building in the Australian music industry.
That actually kind of leads me to a question for you, Annabelle, on the why. Why do we do the ARIA Awards? I mean, it's a huge investment from you. Is it a huge moneymaker? What is the why?
It is definitely not a huge moneymaker.
That's what I suspected. Yep.
We do not make any money off the ARIAs.
None?
Look, none.
Okay.
In fact, often it's the opposite. Yeah, there's a bit of a deficit that gets picked up by the majors. We do it because it's the one night of the year that the Australian music industry really connects with the general public. It brings our artists, our nominees, those who are attending, into the vision of the general public in a way that there is no other event in music that does that. And it's not even just the night. The ARIA Awards creates at least a week of press and mainstream media coverage about, albums that have been released that year or what are the greatest 25 Australian albums of all time. There's a real focus on Australian music and our artists, and that's why we do it, to promote our artists, to get them an audience, to let them shine in the spotlight. And to recognise their achievements over the year. It's really hard now to get success at the moment, which we can talk a bit more about. But, we want to do anything we can to platform and spotlight our amazing artists and the people making the music that we love.
And that kind of brings me to my question around the nominations process. So when you started at ARIA a couple of years ago, you invested a lot of your time meeting with everyone in the industry. I was even one of the lucky ones to chat with you in those early stages. And what did you think was needed during that nominations process at that point, once you got into the weeds of it?
Well, there's a lot of strange perceptions and lack of understanding about how the awards work. There's not much knowledge about the voting processes. So, for example, I think some people think the ARIA board chooses the winners, which is absolutely not the case. How people are nominated, there's a bit of mystery around how that happens. And I think sometimes we see when the nominations are announced, you'll hear people make commentary and, suggest that, ARIA's got it wrong or, whatever, which doesn't really, I think, take a reflection of the fact that this is all industry voted. So we have a panel of over 1,000 voters. Everybody's vote is equal. If you're lucky enough to be on a panel, you go in, you choose you put your votes in the system, and out of that is spat the nominees and the winners. Real lack of information on how it works.
There's a few myths and perhaps perceptions that I would love to dive into now, actually, because I think there's a disconnect between all of the discussions that happen in the ARIA boardrooms and then the discussions that happen in WhatsApp groups among the industry. So chart success always contributed to ARIA Awards due to eligibility. Is that true with these changes, Lynne?
The changes we've made this year are more tweaking. It's about broadening the chart criteria on categories that have it. But chart criteria has been part of the awards, I think, for at least 10 years, I would say. We've had chart criteria for a long time. Mm-hmm. And that's really to help filter the entries. I mean, anyone who's here who's been a voter would know that sometimes you go into categories and you're looking at pages and pages of entries. And really it's about trying to refine it to make sure that judges can make, good choices.
As a voter, there needs to be a bar, or you're literally talking thousands of releases that would be eligible. Anybody who's recorded a song at home and stuck it up on Spotify through CD Baby.
So you support the way the current nominations process works?
I think adding the Australian charts is really important because it is just in the last couple of years, it has become so hard for an Australian artist to chart, and there are this week there was one Australian artist in the top 50 albums and one in the top 50 singles, which happened to be half Justin Bieber.
Are we ready to talk about maybe why that is? Did you want to have a crack?
That's a big discussion.
It's not sure I've got
Do we
that
have
answer in my
another
folder.
90 minutes, perhaps?
I don't know that any of us have the answer.
Yeah.
I think we're in a really dire place right now, and none of us actually know the solution.
It's not just difficult to be a releasing artist at the moment, but there are things in place that now make it prohibitive for a lot of people to actually become working artists. And this is nothing to do with ARIA in many ways. It's everything to do with everything else. It's just that we're in a position now where we're all so conscious of it that the WhatsApp groups are going wild. So people who are in positions who feel they can take more of a public position, which is Annabelle and the ARIA team, we're actually trying to think, okay, well, how can this be a productive ecosystem for Australian artists now, and how can we make sure that this is actually something that is going to set up this idea of steps long term to be able to see a cultural shift and to be able to see Australian artists find their space in culture again. So, again, a lot of this we cannot control. It is just digital cultural ecosystem madness that will find anomaly moments with someone who has found a heartbeat somewhere that's connected really immediately with a particular group of people, and then those ripples become incredible. The issue we've got within Australia is that we have a very small digital footprint for most of our artists, and the footprints coming internationally are very big and very dominant. So as we kind of try to get into the conspiracy theory aspect of all of it, which is the algorithm, is the algorithm showing us what we want to see, or is the algorithm showing us what it wants us to see? I don't think there is an immediate answer to this. I think when we're talking about why ARIA and why the ARIAs, why would you want to be in the ARIAs? You would want a platform. You would want to try and find your own ripple moment, which could involve a performance on the ARIA stage. It could involve recognition that your record has done very well, and then hopefully the promotion from that creates a different digital footprint somewhere else, creates a different conversation with people that might not have had exposure. So realistically, it's when you're planning releasing in general, it's all about your leverage points. Like, where is your point that you think that you can create more noise around your release, around your artist? And this is one aspect of many that need to be addressed. The fact that we're talking about it is incredible, but you know, there's very little I think that ARIA as it stands can actually do in terms of being able to support the chart itself. There's very little we can do in that space until, as a whole, the kind of Australian ecosystem rights itself.
Yeah. Lynne, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to say, going back a bit, that the charts and the awards criteria evolves. So the process I talked about going out to members, you've got until the 12th to respond, just getting a plug in there, is all about trying to seek from members, you know, their views on the criteria, what needs to change each year. And the same with the charts. We introduce new charts occasionally. I talked about the new Australian artist dance charts. They came out this year. So that's really in response to trying to tweak things and create more platforms. So it's all about, you know, trying to create opportunities where we can.
With the charts, you're saying that now being, in a lot of the categories, being a top 50 Australian chart will qualify you. Will you now publish the top 50? Because I think you only publish the top 20 at the moment.
We're only publishing the top 20, Bill, but we've had a chat about that. What we will make available to members is a list of everything that's achieved that in the awards period.
Okay.
So, and then really the criteria is not final yet until we get the feedback from members at the end of this process. Once we know what it is, it might be sensible to then publish that on an ongoing basis. But we will at least make it available for the awards period so people know what they can enter.
I have this very controversial opinion that I might write about one day if I can get my thoughts collected, which is everything that the industry thinks is wrong with ARIA and the charts is the industry's fault. Like, I won't unpack that now. But this is about you. But I really do think, you know, that's why you're putting it out to the industry, saying, please come with feedback. You know, let's try and do this together. But anyway, that's just my controversial opinion that I'm adding. Annabelle, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, one of the other things that we've been doing for quite a while now is we actually release the Australian artist charts an hour before we release the main charts on a Friday. And that was a decision made so that we could give those charts an hour to breathe and for people to go, oh, yeah, that's interesting, and actually have a look at them before the main charts came through. And it is, you know, we have had some good response to that, but, you know, we are constantly looking for ways to try and spotlight Australian success in the charts or, you know, in the industry. And we want to do a lot more of that.
Let's go back to some more perceptions to talk about. So, are the nominations weighted in a way that gives ARIA more say in who wins? Lynne?
ARIA doesn't have any say. So last year, for example, there were 800 individuals who lodged a vote, different in different categories. But for the main categories, there's almost 500 people who vote for those. The board no one on the board gets an additional vote. It only goes based on their membership. Every ARIA member gets a vote. And the majors, I think, get 10 votes per category. And I think the big indies get about half a dozen. So when you consider that Album of the Year had 500 votes, you know, we're sitting back waiting to see what happens.
Major labels only get 10 votes each. My theory is right. Okay, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, exactly. So we're a bit of a hostage to fortune to see what comes out, and we're very interested to see what comes out because we all know what we think would make a great show and make the industry happy, but you don't control that.
Okay, true or false? The eligibility criteria is structured mainly around a system which upweights physical formats and downloads, not streams. This was, of course, said by incredible artist Tasman Keith last year, and I was wondering if we could unpack that.
The awards itself doesn't do any of that, but the eligibility criteria plays into it, and I suppose where that comes into play is the charts. So, yes, on the charts we have 3 categories. We have physical product, we have digital purchases, digital downloads, and we have streams. So each physical purchase and each download purchase counts as one. But for streaming, we do what we call a streaming conversion. And what we try and do is peg it to revenue. So we convert streams into pretend sales, if you like, based on the relationship between how much a label earns from a digital download compared to what it earns from a stream. So every quarter we go through and do a calculation that works out in the year to date how many streams does it take to yield the same amount of revenue as a digital download. We do it in 2 different categories. So we separate subscription premium streams from ad-supported streams. And we get reports from the platforms in those 2 different categories. So we know how many premium subscription plays a particular track had and how many ad-supported plays. And we use the conversion factors to turn them into pretend sales. So the current conversion factors are 170. So it takes 170 subscription streams to equal a digital download. And it takes, I think, 420 ad-supported streams. So what we're trying to do is have some equivalency between what's yielded by each of those
I would
actions.
argue Tasman got it totally the wrong way round. That a physical album gives an Australian artist a shot in the first week by doing a pre-order campaign, and really it's the only hope a lot of Australian artists have of getting in the charts. Whereas the equivalent streams take years to get back to that equivalent of somebody buying a record today, and then that's all your revenue is in. So I think the idea that the charts way towards physical is really only valid for 1 week.
I think there was also a question about vinyl. I mean, I think because people were very concerned that vinyl's hard to get. Sometimes shipments don't arrive. We see that as well when people have pre-order campaigns. But there's no particular weighting for vinyl and the cost. Lots of people say, we can't afford to put that out. They aren't weighted any more than a digital download. So if you can sell something on iTunes, it counts the same way on the chart as a very expensive vinyl pressing.
I have a quick question about the streaming partners that you count. So this is definitely for me and for anybody who has no idea, like how many platforms do you count?
That is a good question. It's one thing I didn't print, but it is on the ARIA website. So if you go and have a look, there's a list that's updated all the time that says who are the information providers, and it's divided up by state for physical and also lists all the online platforms.
Would it be
but
is it 10, 20, 100, 900?
Oh, look, there's probably only 10. And really also we're only counting, obviously, streams that happen in Australia. So it's really about the key services that are operating here. So, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music.
Another streaming question. Are certain playlists and inclusion on those playlists weighted different?
No.
What?
No.
So I could have an artist...
count of premium subscription, how many
That's
of
it.
those, how many ad-supported.
Because there was a perception among a few people that I spoke to that I'm so glad that we're dispelling, is that if a certain artist is on a editorial playlist, they get weighted more than if they were on a mood playlist.
I always presumed that what people meant was they're more likely to be presented to people. So it's not how we're counting it, but it's perhaps who's accessing and where those playlists are pushed.
This actually feeds into your theory of the industry being at its own fault, which is Lynne, the calculations that you use. If you think about how big that number is, that 420 ad-supported streams of a single to equal one sale.
Yep.
There's literally no way, based on streaming numbers for most new Australian artists at this point, that you would ever be thinking that there will be a chart moment for you based on streams.
I understand what you're saying, and we definitely see that with streaming activity, but there isn't that much physical activity. Physical activity.
Singles, it's kind of irrelevant now. Isn't
With
it?
singles,
98%
with
or something
singles, it's
streaming.
completely relevant. I think with everything else, on average, it's north of 90%. So where we see physical having a big impact in the chart is, as Bill said, in week 1, when people plan their campaigns for pre-orders and product drops.
And we plan those campaigns
Absolutely.
for that exact reason, to try to get a high debut.
Yeah, and we see that more for Australian artists, I suppose, really than international artists, because it's people working out how to make that moment of impact.
I guess the question there is back to data accessibility, and I know there's a cost efficiency thing where you have to weigh up, how easy is it to get this data, but if we're looking at physical sales, and I'm guessing that a lot of those data collection points are in metropolitan areas and maybe some regional areas, I think that was a big part of the hip hop conversation of there is this ecosystem happening and growing of like, you know, selling merch and shows of things that might be eligible, but they just don't know how to or where to go to account for that and I guess audit that. So is that like an area that ARIA kind of considers?
Yeah, it definitely is. When we were first doing the charts electronically, which started years ago, I think we had over 1,200 physical retail outlets, but of course those days are way gone.
Sanity's gone.
Sadly, Sanity's gone, Brash's is even gone. So there are many fewer, physical outlets. But really anyone who's selling product should reach out to ARIA as long as you can meet the submission requirements. It's got to be, we don't take handwritten entries. We don't take a phone call that says I sold this many. We need a data file that comes out of your system, and it's supposed to be linked to where you're issuing GST receipts. And really that's for everyone, so that everyone can, consider the chart reliable. So as long as you've got a point of sale system that is recording the information and you can meet our file format, we'll take your data. And we talk to lots of people all the time. In fact, Ian Wallace, our long-standing chart manager, has had a real program this year of reaching out to independent stores. Lots of our chart and marketing committee talk to us about stores that they think should be in. Some people don't want to contribute data. Some people don't want to have an electronic system. They prefer to take cash over the counter. I mean, that does make it difficult. But where people are willing to supply the data, we're very happy to use it.
So is the thinking then that it is almost impossible for an Australian artist to get an ARIA #1 single or album without releasing a physical product with that release?
It's 100% impossible. There's no chance.
How do you curb that?
Am I too definite, Bill, do you think?
Yeah, what's
I'd say there's an outside chance that you could have a #1 single, but album, impossible.
How are you both curbing that with your artists?
By doing massive pre-order campaigns and really engaging the fan base early on. A lot of merch bundles or ticket bundles. So a lot of the time, I do feel we're cheating some of the time. Because when I'm selling a ticket to someone and for $1 extra they get a digital download, I know they're not even going to listen to that digital download when they can go to Spotify and listen to the same songs. So you have to essentially cheat.
I don't think
to
you
get
should
to
see
#1.
it.
I probably shouldn't be saying that, should I?
I don't think you should see it as cheating.
It's within the
because
rules, Bill. It's within the rules.
Lynne says it's legal.
Okay. As long as they can
It's manipulating the rules, I guess. Stretching
as long as they can buy the ticket without being forced to buy the download, and as long as there's a price differential, you're sweet.
No, we operate within the rules, but
Yes.
but we are fudging it a little bit.
Yeah. But we know that chart success often contributes to ARIA Awards success, which often contributes to our export goals within our country.
It contributes to the fees that you get on festivals. Like it's a great tool for booking agents.
Also, charts have been doctored forever. Like not you doctoring, meaning what you do within your management or your label team, whatever it is, to try and get those numbers. Do you remember when it was? What year was it? When it was where it was just the ship, Lynne. It wasn't even over the counter sales. There was like, how many did you ship? Was the chart? There was all these things.
That's on certifications.
That's accreditation.
Oh, that was accreditations. Yeah. So there's a lot of those conversations that happened well before digital messed everything up. In fact,
it was a real game changer.
Yeah.
Shifting to making sure we got those files rather than people filling in forms and faxing them to us.
Yeah.
It made
Can I just
a
make
huge
a
difference.
point? If you actually reduce the number of streams you'd need to get on the chart, it's only going to benefit the artists that are already at the top of the chart.
Exactly.
It's not going to do anything to benefit Australian artists, because the fact is it's reflecting consumption, and the problem we have is people are not consuming Australian music the way they used to.
No, and
New Australian music,
people talk again, the industry talk about there being a problem with the ARIA charts. It's not ARIA. There's even an argument that the general public don't care about the ARIA chart.
No, they're not.
But it is still the only measure we have of success, and so it is a measure of the problem that we face.
It often, we obviously check where it doesn't get mentioned. It gets mentioned quite a lot if you've had success on the chart, particularly though if you're nominated or you've won an ARIA. If an artist is mentioned, it will always be mentioned.
But with Ballpark Music, we've had 5 #2s now, and including one where we were beaten by 22 units. And it's a really big thing for us. Every record is we want a #1, and we go all out for it, and we keep getting number 2. But we care.
That's a holistic management approach a lot as well. You can have financial success, you can have show success, you can have all these other things, but reality with someone that you're managing and you're like daily chats with them to get them to a place where they feel like this is a great career choice. Involve.
How are you going with that?
Yeah. It's a wild ride. I can't believe I'm still doing it, to be honest. It is.
I've been doing it longer
20
than you.
Yeah, it's.
Don't
yeah.
make Jess.
I know. I'm
We
holding
need you.
on, just like gripping right now. You know, there are things that you put in front of someone as a team, collective experience. This idea of achievement, and you know, there's a reason that there are awards globally for art, because art is subjective and nuanced and rarely given a global moment of appreciation. So, you know, it's sort of twofold, I think, with ARIA. If you're nominated and you win, you love the ARIAs. If you're not, you're like, I hate ARIA, it doesn't matter to me. And then if you're able to get a slot on there and you're able to perform and it's this great moment and you feel really supported and someone else has paid for you to do some kind of incredible television performance, which has got a little bit of a viral moment for you, and you get 2 wardrobe changes or whatever it might be, that's an exciting time. You know, that's a moment where you feel like, oh, this is me being successful as an artist.
Go back, like Ballpark Music, good example. They're fully independent, but last year they decided it was important for them to go to the ARIA, so they brought their partners. It probably cost them 10, 12 grand all up to go to the ARIA Awards, but for them that was an important thing to celebrate Australian music, and they didn't think they were going to win, and they didn't. But yeah,
That's wonderful that they did that, and I think that that's something I would like to see more of. You know, we have our Grammy Awards, we have the Brit Awards in the UK, and all of the big artists, including our Australian artists, flock to those awards. Now, do you feel there's something in this industry where our artists who are not nominated aren't likely to attend? And if so, why is that?
I don't think they knew that Red Rooster would be there.
Tell them about the chips.
We consumed 800 kilograms of chicken and chips at the ARIAs last year. That is almost a
surprised.
ton of chicken and chips.
And we hadn't even
In
included that
addition
in the
to all the
catering.
I've done both the Brits and the Grammys for campaigning, right? We have to get into it and it is hardcore. Like we're talking like months of industry chat and there's ads and you really run it. It's like running a political campaign. Certain appearances that you make, it's quite detailed. When the artists are in it and they're doing it, it's the same for the ARIAs now. Like there are a few artists that might culturally decide it doesn't fit for them. It's not the right place for them. But that's fairly rare because actually, you know, as an artist and as a performer, you want to put your work out into the biggest place that you can. You would love more people to see it and hear it and respond to it. So I think right now when you think about what the ARIAs means and is accessibility for artists, and Annabelle and I had a chat about this, like accessibility and inviting artists to participate in it either because they've found someone to pay for the tickets or because they've been invited by ARIA specifically or because they're performing, that should be as open as possible because actually that kind of influence and that idea of being able to hang with peers and sit there and chat and drink some free champagne can sometimes create a really nice culture around it, even for people who are not actively participating in the event for that night. Like you'll hit a point as an artist, you're like, yeah, no, that would be quite nice actually to be amongst other people that do this for a job. Imagine having peers. It's kind of a wild feeling. So I think across the board for all awards, it kind of doesn't really matter how big they are because if you're a British artist, you have a cringe about the Brits. If you're an American artist, you've got a cringe about the Grammys. But if you're invited, you will go.
We have our biggest flag bearers internationally, and if we could get them to be so proud of our award ceremony that they fly home to attend.
Yeah, we really need the industry to back and support the awards, but I also understand that we need to bring the industry with us to get that. And I think, you know, last year's awards, they were a little bit messy. Like, you know, we hadn't done it for a few years, new venue, everything else. But what I was really proud of was, you know, we made huge attempts to be much more inclusive. You know, I think there are a lot of artists and people there who had never been before, and that was very deliberate. Even the logo and colours, it was meant to be welcoming, bright, friendly, come and be a part of the industry because we're all part of this big crazy industry. So, you know, and then we've got to sort of balance that with the aspirational side as well and the glitz and the glamour and making it a fancy hoity-toity event that, you know, looks all posh on TV or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's an incredible event. I mean, I just like, wow, the people here, amazing.
Controversial question. Should it be on television?
100% yes. It gets us to an audience of, you know, nearly 400,000 people accumulated over a week. It gives us a legitimacy that then translates across a lot of other media. And if we weren't on television, we would just fade from relevance even further from the Australian public's mind.
Are there any perceptions or misconceptions that you would like to dispel within the industry? Annabelle, perhaps you should go first, actually.
I think we sort of touched on one, which is that ARIA chooses the winners. ARIA members decide who to enter. The voters then decide who to vote for. That decides the nominees and decides the winners. If you want more female nominees and more non-binary nominees and more people of colour and more First Nations, although we had amazing First Nations representation last year, you have to enter them and you have to vote for them. Like, this issue is a big issue. It's a structural, systemic issue that starts at the very beginning of, which artist labels choose to sign and then put their money behind, and who gets on the festival bills and the shows and all the rest of it. But one way you can affect change is to vote or enter non-white males.
Jess, would you like to add to that? Why women aren't being entered and therefore nominated? Do you agree with Annabelle?
I mean, do not get me started on
Let's
this.
go.
Let's
get into it.
Where I sit. Yeah, okay. There's a lot of. There's two truths actually. This is the thing with this. It's complex. It's very easy to say that historically women have not been represented because they have not been supported. That is true in nearly every industry, if we're honest. The other side of that is culturally, women are less successful in certain genres than men because of this drag that we have of development and acceptance and relevance. Okay, so that's particularly true in a lot of genres, country music being a massive one. So right now, how do you, if you're a voter, and this is the complexity to it, so if you're a voter, and this is actually one thing that we might want to clear up, I have no idea who a voter is. I'm not a voter. Bill is, I've just found out, but we don't know. I don't know who Poppy is, so I don't know who the voters are. So I don't know if we are particularly good within, if you're actively campaigning for an ARIA, I don't think there is a rule book that everyone knows about. I learnt how to do it for the Grammys, and it's a sort of a playbook that you use your PR for and you do all of this. I don't think there is like a knowledge book that's being passed down to people that, if you have no idea about it, how do you put your artist in front of people who are voting? So the only random advice that I had when I came back, because I had been managing overseas for a long time, I had no idea how to do it. So I asked all the questions, and it was like put an ad in Newtown somewhere, like a billboard in Newtown.
Do we want
I don't know.
campaigning?
This is what I don't know. So, but then we're talking about the women, right? So then how do you vote for women? If you are a voting body and you think I would love a woman to be best release of the year, you need to have known that it's come out, which involves the release and the activity and the PR. It involves the charting, which means some modicum of sales success, a chart eligibility success, and then you loving it. So those are all the three conversions, right, that you sort of need. You need all those moments to happen. And I do think that there is going to be an element of this which is, for all the reasons mentioned, less likely to happen for a lot of women across genres. That's just how it's going to be. Whether or not we should go back to gender split categories, I don't agree with. I actually think we should be pushing forward. Discomfort comes with change, right? We're uncomfortable about this. This feels yuck. I'd like it to change. So you got to get through that in order to find the change. Because reversing that and going back to this idea of it just being like, 5 women all competing in the same way, there's going to be people left behind in that group too. There's going to be, different women left behind in different ways because of where they're at. So realistically, the idea of pushing forward in a commercial sense as a female artist, you require all of that support and all of that push, and then ultimately it needs a cultural change point. So as an active participant who's trying to get the ARIA nomination and trying to get the award, that possibly might be a way for you to play it. Vote for a woman this time. She's right here. Maybe that is a dialogue that you're happy to have. And then maybe it is something within the ARIA comms that comes out. We would encourage you to consider not just the lazy vote of the people that you've seen in front of you, which is a lot of men, but there's actually been a lot of female releases too. It's all of these little cultural moments that happen, but it needs to be persistent, and it's going to take fucking ages. It's just going to take ages. Like, I'm annoyed about it because I've been talking about it for way too long. But it's just, that's what I've known. It's like that sense of discomfort where we feel like it's not there yet. It just means we're on the way.
Yeah, Tina Arena told me that she was the first female artist to be named Album of the Year to get that ARIA. And she was shocked by it. She wasn't like, oh, yay, wonderful for me. She was like, are you kidding me? Yeah, that was her attitude. All right, back to misconceptions. Myth.
Award eligibility criteria that you also have to be an ARIA member to be eligible.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going to go. It's the Association Awards and it's ARIA members who put in their entries. So ARIA membership is pretty simple to get, but if people are thinking of entering the ARIA Awards, they need to do that quickly because we're going to be approaching the entries open date soon. So yes, ARIA members. And ARIA members should know about the eligibility because they'll have had all of this correspondence and been sent the draft to look at. So hopefully the criteria won't be a surprise when they go to do their entries.
Could you explain the weighting of physicals and based on the wholesale pool from the majors? Yeah.
Okay, so this has got nothing to do with converting things into streams or backwards and forwards. This is all about the fact that particularly when the electronic charts started, there were 1,200 stores reporting to ARIA, but that wasn't every store in Australia. So what we are trying to do each week is to look at the sample we have. So the stores we sent are a sample of the universe, and to try and work out what the gap is, what's missing. So we were able to get data from the majors of everything that they have shipped into every store in Australia. So they would give us just the unit count for every store, how many singles, albums, and in the old days DVDs. And we would use those to build a big matrix that gave us the relative size of each store in each of those three categories. So we would know if the stores that reported to us in New South Wales, independent record stores, represented 90% of the market or 70%, and we would then gross those sales up. And we would do that in each state based on the group of independent retail stores, chain stores and department stores. So it was a big matrix of trying to estimate the gap. And it was really built on the principle, and we got some advice from an econometrician at New South Wales Uni. It's built on the principle that you assume that like stores in a like area are basically selling in a like pattern. So you can use what you've got to estimate what you're missing.
Yeah, Lynne, any other misconceptions that you would like to dispel?
Well, I'm glad we talked about ARIA members. When we're inviting people to be judges, for the most part, apart from the Prime Minister and the Arts Minister, which would work in this case, we are trying to reach out to people who know music. So we're asking people who we expect to sort of, it's supposed to be a bit of a peer judging process, that people who know and understand Australian music. So we're hoping that, people know what they're looking at. And, we do, as I said, we expect a lot of our judges, and we have different judging schools. So for particular categories, I talked about, 500 people voted in Album of the Year. We didn't have 500 people vote in Best Children's because we don't even invite 500 people. We might only have 90 people who vote in different categories. So the aim is always to try and have people who know or should know the material. That's really what we're aiming for. And so, Bill, I don't know how many categories you vote in. It might change every year, but really what we're trying to do with everyone is match them to categories where we think they're best placed to have an opinion that should count.
Do you vote for your own artists, Bill?
Yes.
Me too. That's messed up. Can we talk about that?
Okay, well, this is my myth dispelling.
The one, yeah.
Here we go. This is my myth dispelling. There's no adult in this room. Okay, it's not like we're sitting here like that guy back there is the one that's in charge of everything and not doing what they should be doing. Who is this mysterious person? Yeah, like we were talking about why aren't there more women nominated? Because Poppy needs to vote for them and Bill needs to vote for them. Yeah. Literally people sitting here saying we need to change this.
Women, though, and I think that's what I'm saying. But that's my personal agenda coming in, which shouldn't come in.
Well, now I think it bloody should, actually. I think it should, because this is a cultural space, right? So that sort of idea of there being, a gatekeeper or, like the adult that's sort of controlling it all in a way. I think everyone needs to realise, especially in an industry this small, is actually that we're all incredibly effective at developing a sense of change within our own space. Okay, whether or not you face a blockage and then you want to push through that in some way, which is why we do panels, which is why we jump on here and say the things that we think we should, because it feels valuable and it feels like it might actually be effective. I think that this part of sort of breaking down this idea of this ARIA gatekeeper, that's a big myth. There's no power that's being withheld from people within this space right now. There's just historic shitty systems that, unfortunately now, because we're in a corporate commercial business, it's an industry, we are being dramatically affected by global conglomerate trends. That's just, it's really easy to say that and be up in arms about it, and then what can you do within your space to actually help to transition us to something that feels a little bit safer and better and more representative? And that's what we're always trying to do. So I think just reminding ourselves that there's no sort of bad guy in this. It's just a lot of really frustrating circumstances that individually and at a corporate advocacy level, we're all trying to find ways through. And that can involve things like exactly what we're doing now. It's like, how do we assess this to make it feel like it's more beneficial for the artists that we're trying to support? How do we push against government to be able to make sure we've got legislative decisions that are being made to support more equitable digital rights within music? All of these extras that we're sort of doing at once, all of this is a part of everything, I think. But there isn't this one gatekeeping moment that represents all of us that's just going to magically clean house.
I am quite sobered by the fact that the major labels, with their 10 votes, will only vote for their own artists. But it's also incredibly understandable too. But I also love that they only get 10 votes. I thought they got hundreds.
No, it's true. And especially because this is the thing too. Like, you realise that we can get really up in arms. And to be honest, like as Australians, we love getting really annoyed about... we love getting annoyed about a lot of stuff, but within the industry, what I've noticed, especially with artists, is like an incredible respect for independent artists and doing it yourself and finding that path. And there's a slight resistance for that major label path, which I get. But I do think breaking that down now to realise that there can be major label relationships which have such a heavy investment, massive financial investment behind someone that's done extremely well, that then benefits the industry as a whole, and that can be a valuable path for some people. It's not for everybody, but for some artists, that will be excellent for them. And actually, that probably should be something that a major label does. They've spent $350,000 on one artist, and that's this one artist that they've pushed and they've pushed and they've pushed, and they're very lucky in the lottery of music. So voting for them and seeing that through, again, as part of that, it may feel less valid to some, but it is a natural part of this ecosystem.
And like you said, it's systemic. And I think that's the biggest part of what ARIA can do and can be doing. While, there's all this talk about charts and awards and eligibility, it's the advocacy around how do we actually support the ecosystem of the Australian music scene, and how do we develop these artists that are coming through to help them become more visible in places like the charts.
Bill, were there any misconceptions that you wanted to talk about?
One that I'm hoping Lynne can reverse. There's perception that all the voters are 50 plus white males like myself.
So if we look at last year, we had 63% male voters and 36% female.
Which is actually exactly what the female-male nominees were. I think it was 36%.
And when you look at the WGEA data for the media and telco sector, it's at 61% male, 39% female. So I don't know if that's a straight correlation, but it sort of means it's not what we want, but we're with the others. LGBTIQ+, we had 11%. Identifying as a person with a disability, we had 2%. People who identified in the ATSI category were about 3.8%. So there's still a way to go, but it's evolving. And every year when we go through the process of reviewing the voting categories, we're asking all the people who help us to focus on and bear this stuff in mind as they're making suggestions for additions and people who should perhaps leave the group.
You can actually apply to be a judge. It's actually, I just looked the other day, it's on the bottom of my email footer, in fact. If you'd like to be considered for the panel, send us an email.
I'm the problem. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I didn't educate myself. I should have done that.
So, Bill, when you hear that data, does that confirm things in your mind, or are you surprised by that?
I think it's encouraging. I think, again, there's a bit of a way to go, but it's encouraging, and it busts the myth, which was the main thing here.
It's exactly what Mitt was saying, though, about the systems, right? It's a systemic thing. Like, so the way that will creep, it takes time. There's going to be the flushing away of the older man and then the incoming of the younger women. So it is a process.
Yeah.
It's also a very interesting conversation as well, because while the numbers on the voting schools are correlated with, I guess, the Australian population, that goes back to, well, why are all these catalogue releases on the charts? Because the voting schools are being represented by the population, which is outweighed by what I would say non-diverse peoples. So is it more about trying to boost those categories up in a representation sense internally and in the industry to help change that kind of systemic view of Australian music?
This catalogue issue, I know you guys know, everyone in music is dealing with this. New music discovery by young people is 80% catalogue or something incredible like that. And in the 20%, you've got Taylor and Harry and Beyonce and Drake. And where do we fit in? But in terms of the specialist categories, even after the R&B and hip hop, especially R&B, one of the strong themes for me was the lack of platforms for R&B. And it feels like such a genre that has got mass appeal, and it is massive internationally. But there are no platforms in this country, or so few, for Australian R&B artists to, perform and show off. And, we want to invest a bit of time in promoting that particular award and using it to showcase. And it was such a sorry thing that last year we only had 4 nominees because we had the criteria which said you needed to chart. And those were the only ones that got there, the 4. The others were so far off that we couldn't even tweak the criteria on the run to get them in, which was such a shame. So this year, I think with our criteria being different for R&B, there'll be a much better, group of people able to participate, and we can do more about storytelling around that genre. We give them a bit of a platform where we can.
A lot of people seem to think that you have to be an ARIA member to be on the charts, and it absolutely isn't the case. So when you're talking about something like the Aussie artist R&B and hip hop chart, you're competing against. It's all of those people competing against each other. But you've got to be in. So you've got to put yourself on survey. So if anyone has a question about how to do that, they should email us. There's an FAQ on the ARIA website that says, I'm an independent artist, how do I chart? Look for that, and there's a link to give us the details of your release so that it can be considered for the charts. Because it was really painful last year to only have 4 nominees in that category. People perhaps could have been on the chart if they had put themselves forward for charting. And I would really encourage people to do that. Even if you don't think you're going to do enough to be on the ARIA charts, we provide all the data to AIR for them to do their own charts. So if you don't make the ARIA chart, you still might have some success on the AIR charts because it's the same data that's passed on to them to apply their own filters to then produce the AIR charts. So it's definitely worth doing.
Yeah, and they have their own awards as well, and that global storytelling opportunity is still there. Exactly. They can come to, if you have a win, you can come to media publications like the ones I work with. We can help you tell that story. Super important.
But we can't count it if we don't know about it.
Yeah. Sorry, can I have a quick little reminder of the eligibility changes to the R&B and hip-hop charts? I know we spoke about it at the very start, but I feel like right now is a good way to drive it home.
There's been no change to hip-hop proposed. Mm-hmm. But for R&B, given what happened last year, we have said that it is not a chart appearance that's required, but you needed to have been surveyed. So put forward for the R&B soul chart.
Mitaru, do you think there needs to be changes for the hip-hop eligibility?
I think there's a lot of things that should be done before looking to change the chart criteria. One is just the education piece of, this is the criteria. This is how you survey. This is, who you talk to if you don't know the information, because, a lot of young artist managers, independent artists, even independent labels wouldn't know how to put themselves forward to, be eligible for a chart. And then secondly, I think a lot of the talk on the hip hop panel was more around that advocacy component of, how do we go to government and mainstream media to stop portraying hip hop as this, violent category and such a bad thing. So I think personally, those two components are more important than jumping straight into changing a chart criteria.
Excellent point. And I wanted to talk about the new release chart that ARIA unveiled last June. Was there a wider strategy around why that came into place?
It was really about trying to get over the fact that so much music in the charts is old and it's kind of hogging all the spots. So again, it was another way to try and surface new music, make the charts a bit more dynamic because they can be quite stagnant as well. And hopefully, get some more Aussie artists in there as well. And that's been sort of mildly successful in terms of the Australian artists. But again, this issue that we have is affecting all the charts. And Jess, I completely agree with you. And you, Bill, and I think we all know there isn't one thing that we can do to fix things. It's going to be a rebuild brick by brick in the wall, looking at a range of different mechanisms and options and, to back our artists to get them success back to where we used to be.
I might just quickly add in that education piece that Mitt was referencing. I think it ties back to talking about what you can do within your own space. So, us being really frustrated about not being at the ARIAs and then loving that WhatsApp chat going off at the end of the day, realising that actually the person that didn't put your artist in was you might be a good thing. So you're like, oh yeah, shit, okay, I should have done that and that and that. That also might not be on you. It could be the fact that your, mentoring group isn't wide enough, that in fact, there wasn't enough ARIA outreach or there wasn't enough access points for you to feel like you could get that information. Those are all of the elements that we're talking about now. It's like, how can you actively do it? Like, even coming back from overseas, I just assumed that all of my artists would be taken care of by the labels. Didn't even think about it because I've never had to. Right? So for all of us within that, and that's with me having daily conversations. So if I'm struggling to find the information or just to know that it's something that I should have front of mind, and then we're talking about people with far less experience and less access to texting Annabelle, like that awareness is really key. So in fact, all of us independently, if we're mentoring someone or if we're assisting in a release or if you're sitting here and you've got friends that could actually advocate for their own artists and make sure they're in there. Like right now, if you have an R&B artist, you'd be really, really wanting to hustle because you'd probably be able to be in with a pretty good shot right now. Like I would like an R&B artist right now because I could use this.
Well, yeah, because if you're thinking about entering something now, put it on survey now. You might have released it 6 months ago, but we're only asking for survey, not to have actually charted. So
yeah, so that,
it's time to get on with it. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that would cover the artists that felt last year they should have been nominated last year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, so they could add to the survey now, even though the record was released last year? And
Yeah.
If they hadn't been on survey, yeah.
if they weren't on survey.
Yeah. And if they were on survey, well, they would be eligible. So.
Isn't that incredible? Like 2 of our top artist managers in the country learning about this stuff now. Like this transparency is so important.
If I make a R&B record, Jess, will you manage me?
There is such a high likelihood, Bill, that because of history, you would just win. Best R&B, it's this old white guy.
Because that's exactly what we want to happen. Yeah.
Oh,
That is not going to give us a good day.
I'm
when that is
laughing so I
announced.
don't cry. My goodness. Okay, so I think one thing that we can all agree on is that the ARIA Awards are so important. It's so important with our goal to be an export country. Because it's televised, and the importance of it being televised means that it's in mainstream media for over a week. There's so much storytelling opportunities there, that mainstream coverage, the flow-on effect, I don't even think we need to go into. I think we get it. But I think let's end with a final question before anyone has any audience questions, which is, if you could wave your magic wand right now and have the industry as a whole take action on one thing related to ARIA nominations, what would it be? I think I know what your one might be, Jess.
Is it about the ladies?
Yeah. Lynne, do you have one?
Look, I've got a shopping list. I'll say it one more time. The document's out with members. What we've asked you to do is to stress test the things that you think you're going to want to enter against the criteria. do it now so that you can give us the feedback now before the criteria is finalised. I cannot tell you how frustrating it is to get to the day that voting opens and then people contact you, or they don't, they go to Twitter, to say this is outrageous, particularly when you've gone through a month consultation period with members to ask if the criteria looks okay. So look at it now. Please don't wait until it's too late, because that's not good for any of us. So stress test the things that you are planning to enter and make sure that you can. And if you can't, contact us so we can talk about whether it's appropriate therein or not. Because maybe the criteria is what everyone thinks is right, but perhaps it isn't, and there are things we haven't considered.
Annabelle?
We're never going to get it right perfectly, but what we really need is support from the industry, because it is really challenging to get outside attention for the awards and for the things that we do. And if we do become irrelevant with the broader public, then that is just going to be one less platform that our artists have to connect with an audience. And we do this for the industry, we do this for the artists, and we need people's support and a bit of understanding, I think, sometimes, that we're not going to get it all perfect, but that it's not the end of the world. And please engage with us. Like, talk to us about things you're not happy about. Talk to us about the criteria. It's not secret. In terms of judging panels, we can't release the names of all the people on all the panels for privacy reasons, but if you want to be on a panel, let us know. We're open. This is an award. It's not like we've got to change the constitution every time. We don't need a referendum. We can change things. Engage with us. Tell us what you think, and perhaps we can get things changed,
When we look objectively at the quality of the records that this country produces and the quality of artists, it is outrageous. We punch above our weight so much. It's one of the reasons why I came back. I was like, I wish our country was, 5 times bigger in population, so we could have a more, financially successful career base for most of these artists. But also maybe that's one of the reasons why the art's so good. Sometimes we just got to take it. I think just acknowledging that the quality of the records, like across the board, when you're nominated especially, tend to be so excellent in comparison that it deserves celebration regardless of all of the other messiness that comes with it. So I think it's probably that, recognising and getting back to the point that eligibility aside, the recognition for the artists and the quality of that is so crucial, and that should be led by the women. In summary.
There it is. No. Nice. Mitaru.
I'll just say, I guess, transparency, accessibility, and kind of digestibility of information from
so key,
artists.
Digestibility. Thank you.
Because, I shouldn't have to read through a 90-page charting criteria to understand how people can chart.
There's a nice one-pager that ARIA released, though.
Yes.
And the FAQs are good.
Yeah. And then also, again, until 2 weeks ago, I didn't know that anyone could apply to be in the judging schools.
Neither.
So, yeah.
We're learning all the time as well. Communicating with people is an ongoing journey. And so many people are consuming information through Instagram. I myself love the little flick through slides that you can read something. So, we're definitely going to be looking at ways that we can get information out to all different genre communities as well. Perhaps using people, one of the suggestions from the panels on Monday was using people from hip-hop to explain to people from hip-hop how the hip-hop charts work. That makes complete sense to me. And those networks that those guys have are way better than our networks in those genres. So those sorts of things are things that we're going to be looking at.
And Bill, if you had a magic wand?
Gosh, so much I want to do with that magic wand. I just think, given the kind of crisis we're all at, we all need to work together and be transparent and throw our problems on the table, not expect any one person or one sector to have all the answers, but we got a lot of talking to do over the next kind of year or so.
Yeah, and take ownership, right? This is our problem.
Educate yourself. We love this in advocacy circles, educate yourself. So whose job is it to educate you on if you can have your artist be eligible within the ARIA chart? It's you, if you're a manager or a label or even an artist, because all of us had no idea of a lot of things, and that is on us. It's not on Annabelle. It's on the damn website.
It's our responsibility.
Amazing. Well, okay, well, that's it. Thank you so much. And please join me in thanking our incredible panellists here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Poppy.
Thank you.
My pleasure.